Story 1. There was a girl freshman year who went missing. She ended up being found dead in the river. There were rumors that she was seen on a bridge with her boyfriend the day she went missing. Nothing was ever found, and they assumed it was suicide or an accident. Fast forward 25 years, and the boyfriend, his best friend of several decades, set a fire to cover it up and went on the run. A couple of days later, he killed a woman at a rest stop in the bathroom to steal her car. They reopened the case about the high school girlfriend. The rumor was correct all along. He will be in prison the rest of his life. Story 2. There were rumors about a music teacher and a student, but they were both pretty dramatic people and did very little to dismiss the talk. So half the school wanted to believe it for the salacious thrill, and half just waved it off as attention-seeking and talking. Teacher got canned without explanation. Most of us just figured it was budget-related. A math teacher filled in on his music and theater roles. Years later, I randomly caught up with the student, and she said the rumors were true. She freaked out and tried to end things to shake off the reputation, and eventually the teacher showed up trashed and on her family's front lawn, in the rain, yelling out for her, like a really f***ed up version of John Cusack from Say Anything, but with less boombox and more drenched. Story 3. There was this weird closet built into the middle of the hallway. Yep, the middle. So you had to walk around a giant block of a closet. But the door was always locked. Every morning before the bell rang, we'd meet up by the closet block because it was close to our lockers. The rumor was that it was full of mold because our school was underfunded and gross. But I figured it was just janitorial supplies. I had never seen a janitor go in there, but why would they leave a closet full of mold? Plus, there was already a room that was full of mold. The old boiler room, which was underground and hadn't been used in decades. Then one day, the door was unlocked. Mold. So much mold. Multiple stacks of German textbooks were rotting inside this closet. The pages were wavy and stuck together, and the whole thing was covered in black spots with a white dust on top. The closer you got to the bottom of the stack, the more uniform the books became. They had literally melted together and dried. Lord knows how many times. I simply closed the door and said, "Well, guys, I guess this is why we only have Spanish as our foreign language." TLDR, weird closet full of mold that was dealt with by being locked all the time. Story 4. I attended a newly opened high school that apparently used to be a school for troubled kids. Someone told me there were padded rooms somewhere in the school, so I skipped lunch with a friend one day to walk the halls and find them. They did exist, but by the next year, they were renovated into offices and storage rooms. I thought that was pretty interesting, and seriously wondered what went on there before it was turned into a normal high school. Story 5. Lead in the water. Our high school tap water was dark brown, and we weren't allowed to bring our own water bottles or get filtered water from the cafeteria without paying $3. We sent hundreds of emails asking the school board to look into it, but they said it was fine. In my senior year, a student did a science fair project on the illegal amount of lead in the tap water, forcing the school to investigate and fix all the taps. Story 6. There were stories about the music teacher having sex with some of his students in exchange for solos, better grades, prestige, or jobs after graduation. They later turned out to be true. He was found guilty in 2018 and was given a 6-month prison sentence. He's barred from teaching and lost his pension. The news hit my dad rather hard since they studied together at college and were good friends. Dad had no idea. Story 7. That the first-year baseball players were getting gang by older players for their hazing. I don't think we ever got a formal investigation, and the kid that came forward was already out of town by the time he told any authorities. But several senior and junior players were expelled that year. Story 8. That our high school had an extensive network of underground tunnels and shelters left over from World War II. Sure enough, not long after I graduated, they were renovating one of the weight rooms that was either at basement level or partially underground. And they found an entire walled-off room stocked with supplies from the early Cold War era that no one had remembered. So maybe the supposed tunnel system under the football field was a bit of a stretch. But there definitely were hidden shelter and stockroom areas that had been forgotten about. Story 9. Due to budget cuts, all of our metal and wood workshop machines were to be taken away and replaced with worse versions. The shop teachers and drama teachers that were in the building at the time did not like this idea, so they hid all of the machines in a false wall somewhere in the building. The people came to pick them up, and they told them that people had already come to pick them up and that they were late. They did some looking around and couldn't find the machines and gave up. A few years and one principal later, they brought the machines back out from behind the walls. And that's how the smallest high school of our district, with only around 450 students, became the best school in the district to learn metal and woodwork. Story 10. For years before I got to my high school, there was a rumor that the admin assistant, the guy you went to when you got in trouble, was doing drugs, selling drugs, and confiscating from students without turning over to the police. Well, about 5 years or so after I graduated, he got busted a couple towns away for possession of cocaine with intent to distribute. Story 11. We had a math teacher who was home. This was in the 80s, so it was more of a thing then. Well, he was still closeted, but it wasn't much of a secret. He and the health teacher had a brutal rivalry, talked about each other all the time, played pranks, hated each other, etc. The conspiracy was that they were lovers, even though the health teacher was married. A few years after I graduated, I heard they were found out, and he had put a bullet through his brain. Story 12. An English teacher who was close with students, not in a way, but more like he was a fellow student instead of an authority figure, was hosting weekend poker parties with his closest students where he would serve booze and one weekend, someone prank called the cops, claiming one of these parties was happening. They went to his place, and there was one happening as described, but with on every TV in the house. Teacher was immediately fired, had his license revoked, and disappeared for a couple of years. Students tried protesting the firing because, well, he was the cool guy who gave them booze. According to social media stalking, he's back teaching English at a high school a few hours south of my town now. Story 13. Automotive mechanics program in high school. The teacher was suspected to be doing drugs. In class, it often looked like signs of withdrawal would take over and entirely consume him. It turns out he was doing drugs because when he was let go, we found needles and spoons under the seat of a school vehicle we had been working on. I hope he's doing well. It was sad to see him deteriorate in a short amount of time. Story 14. Rumor. 9th grade kid had a hit list and was going to stab people. Rumor spread like wildfire, and the school resource officer was alerted. Next day, the bus on the kid's road was singled out and isolated at the bus drop-off zone. The school resource officer, a local police officer, assistant principal, and the kid's grade counselor all boarded the bus. SRO searched the bag and found a kitchen knife. Kid was taken off the bus and arrested. I have no idea what happened after that. Story 15. My algebra teacher was having an online affair. She would teach us for about 5 minutes and then tell us to read to ourselves and do our work while she typed away on her computer. One day, she just didn't show up. Turns out, she left in the middle of the night to move out to Ohio to be with her internet boyfriend. Pretty mild, but I grew up in a town of 700 people, so it was huge news. Also, our volleyball track coach is sleeping with senior girls. There was even a fist fight between 2 girls over this. I didn't really pay much attention until I got into high school and joined track. He had me doing weird stretches when he was directly behind me while I was bent over. I was super innocent and fairly dumb about sex. I knew it was creepy, but I just rolled with it, although I was uncomfortable. One of the boys on the track team who I swore hated me because he was always picking on me pulled me aside and told me what the coach was doing was and he was clearly excited the whole time. This kid went to the principal in my defense, and the coach resigned that next year. I don't believe he was ever caught, but after he resigned, I learned his wife was a former student of his, and their relationship started while she was in high school. Story 16. I don't believe this to be true at all, but I once went to a school with a particular water fountain nobody would drink from. Why? Because apparently someone pissed on it. About a decade after graduation, I returned to the school to work as an educator. I stopped to drink from the water fountain because it was the only one that was free, but one of my students stopped me. "Don't drink from that fountain, someone pissed on it." Story 17. When I was in ninth grade, my friend told me there were two teachers with funny names. One was Mr. Neck, which I knew. The other was Mr. Head, and his first name was Richard. I told her to shut up, that it's probably a stupid rumor, like the rumor that there's a pool on the third floor. No parent would be cruel enough to name their kid that. The next year, Mr. Richard Head was my biology teacher. He was a nice guy, and I absolutely adored him. His wife worked in the office, and she was great too. I ended up working with his stepdaughter a few summers later. She told me he was Richard Head III. Story 19. Substitute teacher in junior high, who was married to the full-time 8th and ninth grade biology teacher, who was smoking hot, looked like Christina Applegate in her mid-20s, always wore tight dresses and suits that exposed most of her legs with high heels, was rumored to be in. Well, another kid at school found some older pics of her online. It was something like soccermomsgonewild.com, and turned out to really be her. It somehow was even reported in the news. She was fired. The husband kept working there, and I think she just leaned on her side business, wedding planner. But man, every boy in whatever class she was in just froze up with a tight. She was incredibly beautiful and at the same time intimidating with her stern stares. Story 20. That the 7th grade history teacher is a. He treated the girls better than the boys, like giving only the girls nicknames, greeting them but glaring at the guys, etc. This one girl accused him of flicking her bra strap while they were alone in his classroom. Fast forward 3 years, my brother told me that the teacher randomly disappeared from teaching. The school said he retired, but it happened at the near middle of the year, which was very suspicious. He most definitely got fired for being a. Scary thing is, he drove the bus too. Story 21. 2 years ago. Not my school, but one where my friend taught. The superintendent's daughter got a job at the high school. This was a job that had about 300 applicants, but magically, she got it. Anyway, there were rumors of this teacher, who was 22 at the time, having an inappropriate relationship with one of her male students. For most of the year, it was just flirting and nothing beyond that. But starting in April, they began having and the student started telling everyone about it. You can guess how that ended. Teacher fired, and the superintendent resigned because of health reasons over the summer. Story 22. Each year, the senior French class, or the ones who could afford it, took a trip to Paris. One year, maybe like 8-ish years before I got there, one of the girls on the trip snuck out of the hotel they were all staying in to meet a guy. Nobody ever saw her again. I always thought it was just some urban legend, but lo and behold, the French teacher who was on the trip and still teaching when I was at the school verified it one day. Honestly, the best case scenario is she was that night. I shudder to think of the alternatives. Story 23. We were told by our school that we were having a merger with our rival school in an attempt to give the students a better chance, which caused a lot of issues transferring credits-wise, and also caused a lot of teachers to get laid off. But in actuality, the superintendent got a deal to sell the school's land for a huge sum of money, only for the deal to fall through, and now the old school is currently abandoned and will probably get bought for probably not even a fraction of the original price. All because they got greedy. Story 25. Everyone in my class in 7th grade was a real jerk to our social studies teacher. She was a 30-something-year-old woman who peaked in high school, and for the life of her never seemed to find love. We all thought she was desperate to find a husband. Rumor was that she'd been on dating websites during class. This was early 2000s, mind you. But then one time when we had a field trip, we went to the mall food court for lunch, and instead of chaperoning the students, she legit invited a date to meet her there. So we're all sitting there in the food court snickering and watching her flirt with some random guy. As an adult, I feel bad that we picked on her, but to this day, thinking about her bringing her date to the food court is kind of funny. Story 26. Not in high school, but in elementary. There was this conspiracy that somewhere near our school there is an abandoned 2-story old creepy house. In the residential lot, there is also an external restroom, locked. Few people living nearby can hear strange noises at night coming from it. Common hearsays state that a strange person is living inside there with nothing to eat but his own secretions, with his slippers as his dinner plates. So we decided to check on it on our noon breaks and got into the lot. The locked restroom only had ventilation by decorative blocks that had decorated holes on it, so we could only peek a little. We got something to climb onto and peeked into the holes. And there it was. There really was a strange man living in it, walls covered in feces and emitting a very foul odor. The man started screaming and threw fecal matter on the walls. We started to bolt the F out of there and never came back since. It turns out the man had some violent mental disorders, and the family decided to lock him up in there. I think the neighbors were the ones that fed him. Poor man. I don't know what his status is now, as it's been a long time, and it's too vague to remember. 28. There was a door on the side of my school building. There was a rumor that a homeless man lived there, but I just thought it was a janitor's closet. One day, a guy kicked a ball into that door, and a guy in overalls opened the door and started screaming at the kid. We were scared shitless, and the teachers told us that a homeless man lived there, and in return, he usually cleaned the school after we were gone. I never walked in front of that door ever again.